Please put your hands together for Cris.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Should we try that again? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good. Everyone's had as much coffee as me by the sounds of it. So, what I want to do this morning is I'm going to leave Bruce to give you an overview of technology and innovation, because I think he's much better versed and better placed to do that than me. What I want to do this morning is give you a real overview about some of the conversations I have with clients in your sector and in many others around the world. I want to try and inspire you to think bigger about innovation, to think outside, the norms of your industry, and try and help you break some of the constraints that seem to hold your sector back. And the big one, obviously, that James pointed out was regulation, and how that seems to stifle your views on how innovative you can really be. So first of all, I'd like to start with this. 2008, September the 15th. Now, if anyone's read my background, you'll realize that serendipity and luck plays a massive part in some of our lives. And I spent about 15 years building a group of companies in the design sector, and I managed to sell on September the 9th. So 6 days before that fateful day, which has changed, the course of business, consumers, customers' lives over the past 6 years. And when Lehman Brothers crashed, they filed the biggest bankruptcy in history. So just to try and get you all in the mood and liven things up a little bit, we're going to have a little competition. The first person, and I don't know whether this prize is of any value to you or not, but it's one of my books, so we'll be the judge for that. So if you know the answer and you don't want a book, just don't put your hand up. Who knows how much Lehman Brothers finally filed for bankruptcy for? The first 5 people to shout out, and we'll just go with the closest one, otherwise we'll be here all morning. So 100 billion. You're one of the, you can't have a go, you're one of the speakers, this is for guests. Sorry? 450 billion, 300 billion, 650 billion, one more.
700 billion.
I think this young lady gets a book. My notes here say $619 billion. Yeah. Now, I've lost money over the course of my career and being an entrepreneur and building companies. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. Fortunately, at the end of it, luckily I was up a little bit. But $619 billion for guys that are supposed to be good with numbers is pretty cataclysmic. And what that did at the time was set in motion a series of events, and it set in motion 6 years of reinforcement that innovation and adaptability and change and ability to move with customers and changing trends and all those things, it set in stone the need for innovation. Here's the downside. What most businesses have done, and some of you will have done the same, and in reality, there's nothing wrong with this, and what we have to do when times are hard and when big events like that hit us that just come out of the blue, we have to hunker down, we have to survive, we have to do whatever it takes to stay in business. The problem is, some of us were caught sleeping. Not like this Chinese guy on the railway track, but some of us were caught sleeping, some of us were caught out. And we've seen some of the biggest brands and the biggest organizations in the world go under because they failed to change, they failed to adapt, and at the time, they weren't relevant with where the market was and where customers were. So we've seen Borders and Jessops and Woolworths and dozens and dozens of Kodak, Blockbuster, dozens of really iconic big businesses. Blockbuster, $4-5 billion turnover. Kodak valued at about the same. And these guys, were confident about the size of their organization. We're big. We've been around for years. We're okay. We're going to be all right. And like that, they've disappeared. And it just shows how size, legacy, multi-billion-dollar turnover, all that infrastructure is no safeguard against massive change. You'll all know this guy, arguably one of the most successful boxers ever. And he famously said, after one of his most, the biggest defeats was, everyone has a strategy until they get punched in the face. And I think metaphorically, the crash and the recession, Lehman Brothers, has metaphorically punched many of us in the face. Businesses, customers, consumers, governments, yeah? We've taken that hit, and it's affected us in a big way. Some of us have been lucky, and we've got up, and we've survived the 10 count, to use another boxing analogy, and we've ploughed on. The challenge is, I think the biggest punch in the face is yet to come. And the biggest punch in the face for me is, while the recession's gone on, and most of us have hunkered down and we've done whatever we needed to survive, the world has completely changed. And I think now the biggest punch in the face that many of us face, or will face, is we're completely out of line and we're misaligned with where the world is now. And our biggest challenge over the next few years is going to be, how do we realign our organizations? How do we use innovation? And how do we become relevant again? And then how do we stay relevant in order to thrive and succeed? And I think that paves the way for innovation being one of the most important tools that we all need to build. The downside, and some of you will be culprits in this room, but we will name no names. As James alluded to before, your industry and banks and financial services have treated customers unfairly. There's been scandal about pay and bonuses, bullying tactics, and all those things serve to distance you guys from customers and consumers even more than many of you are today. So what we need to do is we need to decide how much, how big, and how to change what we do and how we do it. We need to look at innovation as a tool for getting around the guidelines and circumnavigating the things that you all believe hold you back. I absolutely disagree with anyone that says they can't innovate because of regulation. It's just simply not true. Innovation and thinking differently, design thinking, all those tools allow you and will allow you to come up with game-changing, creative, clever solutions. And regulation, I absolutely guarantee you, is no barrier. I just think it's an excuse. The first thing to learn is that to succeed through innovation, you've not only got to change what you think about innovation, you've got to change fundamentally what your whole industry thinks about absolutely everything. You've got to change what you think about customers. You've got to change what you think about consumers, trends, the future. You've got to think completely differently about your whole industry. I think what holds many of you back is you think too much within the constraints of your industry. And yet, we've seen great examples of people completely destroying sectors and industries that they shouldn't have done. We've got Skype, who are the biggest telecommunications provider in the world, yet they've got no network infrastructure. We've got Amazon, who are the biggest bookseller in the world, and they haven't got one bookstore. We've got brilliant examples of organizations that think differently and have disrupted different markets and different sectors. And your industry is no different. It has the ability to do that if you only start to think widely and think bigger about how innovation can help you achieve that. One of the challenges is that the business strategies that you all use are yesterday's strategies. They're not aligned with where customers are today, and they're certainly not aligned with where customers are going to be tomorrow. As I said earlier, I think the pace of change and the way the world has changed over the last 5-6 years has out-changed many organizations and many sectors, and yours being one of them. What we have to do now is realign and redesign how strategically we push our businesses forward. And the key thing is we have to become relevant again. So I thought, seeing as you guys are all familiar and you like numbers, you're those kinds of people, I thought I'd give you a few figures. if you look at most of the surveys, and the figures are slightly different depending on which survey you look at, but globally, if you look at most of the surveys, 75 to 80% of CEOs expect to have to reinvent their business model and their organization over the next 5 years. Yeah? Who's facing that in their organization at the moment? Who's having those conversations? Theoretically, it should be about 80% of you. All right? Here's the imbalance, and this is the first thing as leaders we need to start addressing now. Of those 80%, only 35% are confident that they'll be able to do so. So that imbalance, from a leadership point of view, from a CEO point of view, has to be addressed now. And if you look at the statistics and the time frame, you've got 5 years before CEOs expect they will have had to reinvent their organizations. So hopefully, you're all sat here and you're from one of the 35%. If not, that's the first thing I want you to take away from today. How do we start to understand what we need to do and how we need to change and how we need to innovate over, in relative terms, in business terms, a really, really short time frame? It's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Clever guy said that a hell of a long time ago, but it's absolutely relevant today. Legacy, size, you guys saying, yeah, but we're a big company, we've been around for years, we'll be okay. That has no currency in the world that we operate in today. No currency whatsoever. The big thing you guys need to understand is your competition isn't in the room. It used to be. Your competitors aren't sat behind you, next to you, in front of you. Your competitors, most of them, probably don't even exist yet. But within the next few years, they will. They're not, and because of that, they're not even on your radar. You don't even know that they exist. So you can't look out for them, you can't prepare for them, and you don't know where they're going to come from. But they're going to come quick, and they're going to come from an angle that you just can't defend, you can't prepare for. So the main thing is that I want you to take away is the second thing is start looking out for where the disruption is going to come from, because it's likely that it's not going to come from your peers in this room. And build the capacity through innovation to be able to allow you to change. Here's an overview of how businesses traditionally operate. This is what we call the old game. And traditionally, innovation's focused on product and service innovation. And that's where most people over the last few decades have really focused innovation efforts. Businesses typically, and the recession has driven this, have focused on finding cheaper ways of doing the same thing. So how do we cut cost? How do we create margin by just cutting a little bit off here and a little bit off there? How do we manage risk and the uncertainty of what's going to happen? And how do we increase existing market share and try and forecast what that looks like to try and predict some type of growth or sustainability? And the final thing is, how do we do all that with traditional leadership, traditional management, traditional organizational structures and hierarchy? The challenge is, that's the old game. And throughout the recession, those that have been hibernating and those that have been asleep have now awakened to a completely different world. And the world over the next 10 years is going to get more and more and more aligned with what we think and the guys that I work with think are going to be the really important things to focus on. So here's the new game. A wider focus on business models and moving from product and service innovation to experience and building great and amazing customer experiences. Finding differentiated ways of doing things that are relevant to the customer, not focused on you guys becoming more operationally efficient. And the relevant bit there is the key, because everything you have to do has to be aligned to where customers and consumers are today and where they're going to be tomorrow. Innovation requires us to embrace risk. Yeah? We can't not take any risk if we want to push the boundaries and push things forward. And I know that's difficult specifically for your sector, maybe more so than most. But as leaders, we have to understand that risk is a fundamental part of any innovation process. And if we continue to try and avoid risk and mitigate risk, then we'll get barely incremental innovation at best. We need to focus on being able to shape markets and influence them. And we do that through co-creation and co-innovation with customers. We don't just gather data and insight and traditional forms of big data and information. We don't gather that and then react to it and produce stuff that we presume, because we've designed and developed it from the data, that customers want. The next generation of customers will want to co-create solutions with us. And we need to build organizations that are capable of doing that. And you may have heard the term open innovation. That's a fundamental part of open innovation. And the big change from a leadership point of view is we need to understand how to lead for innovation. And leading innovation is fundamentally different than the traditional form of leadership and management. It requires new skills and it requires new behavior. And unless we start working on that as one of the core focuses, we can't expect to build cultures of innovation. We can't expect to drive innovation capability throughout our organizations. We have to fundamentally change how we do things and how we operate as businesses if we want different behavior and different outcomes. And here's why. Dozens and dozens, several decades ago, the world was really focused, the industrial age was focused on production and manufacturing and engineering. Yeah? So he who had the biggest factory won. 50 years on, so several decades ago, technology started to come to the fray, the microchip, computers, all those things allowed us to move into more streamlined products, to scale things down. It allowed us to start communicating because we started to have telecommunications and the internet. And companies like Bruce's providing us with technological and IT solutions. And that's made us more efficient, it's allowed us to communicate, it's allowed us to share knowledge. But now everyone's got access to that, so the playing field started to level again. So what's the next wave? What we have to do is look at where the next wave of customers, consumers, and more importantly, or just as importantly, employees are coming from. So we're all familiar with Generation Y, but who's thinking about Generation Z? Because Generation Z will be here with us within 10 years. Yeah? As big organizations, we need to start changing and morphing into organizations which are going to be aligned with those customers, consumers, and employees. We need to start that change now, because we won't be able to do it quickly. We won't be able to do it overnight. That type of customer, that type of consumer, and that type of employee is going to want to work in a fundamentally different way. They're going to want to co-create. They're going to want to be part of the values and vision of our organization. And those have to be and will have to be aligned to their personal values. They're going to fundamentally work in a different way, and they're going to buy in a different way, and they're going to demand things from us in a fundamentally different way. And we need to start making that transition now. And innovation is one of the key things that they're going to want to be part of. So I think experience and bringing those customers, consumers into the whole way we operate, our innovation process, into the heart of our organization is where we need to start moving to. And that fundamentally changes our strategy from moving away from what we do to how we do things. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's going to help your sector. Because when you move away from what you do, from products and services, to how you do those things, that frees you up and it moves you away from the constraints that seem to hold you back, which is regulation. So I think we need to move from focusing on what we do and start to build strategies around how we do that. And that fundamentally changes the game. Amazon understand this, but in fairness, they took this off Steve Jobs. And what Steve Jobs fundamentally understood was that their goal was to really understand the customer and the consumer and start and make them the starting place and then work back. And whatever the solution ended up being at that point, that's what it was. They didn't start with a piece of technology. They didn't start with a smaller microchip or processor and then build a product around it. They started with the customer and the problem and the issue the customer had and what customers wanted to solve, wanted to do, wanted to be better at, and then engineered the solution back from that. And it doesn't matter that Jeff Bezos has taken the same philosophy. The fact is, they're one of the most successful companies on the planet. But more importantly, what he said over several years repeatedly is he said, we obsess about the customer. I think we need to move on from obsessing about the customer, and we need to obsess with the customer. Because the customer is going to want to co-create and co-innovate with us. So the other thing I want to take you away is how do you move your organizations into a mode where they can obsess with the customer? Yes, and the laughter is because we all know what's coming. Who's flown with this guy? Obviously not personally, but who's flown with this guy? Right. Who would fly with them again? So it's all about cheap. It's all about cheap. If it was all about cheap, they wouldn't be in a pickle. The reality is, for the majority of people, it's about experience. And these guys got it totally, totally wrong. The reality is, they've done really, really clever, genuinely innovative, different stuff. And we can't take that away from them. The problem is, they did it aligned to the wrong set of values. So the innovation was about them, not about the customer. And that's what they got wrong. I think last year, it was either last year or early this year, they voted the worst brand in the UK, something like that, the worst company in the UK. And they're now, as you'll have seen, on a massive turnaround and cultural change project. So the value of innovation can't be denied. But what you have to get right is you have to innovate for the right reasons. You have to innovate against a set of values that are absolutely aligned and relevant to the customer. One of the big things that innovation will help you solve is moving away from homogeneous product lines. And the reality is the majority of your products and the majority of products in this room, available from most of you, will be really homogeneous. Now, if it's difficult, or if your perception is that it's difficult to redesign and design new products because of regulation, I still maintain that I don't believe that. But if it's a challenge that you think holds you back, start to think about how you can differentiate those products, even if the product stays the same. But what we can't continue to do is expect customers to buy when the product line is homogeneous. Hands up who used to own a Nokia phone? Who has owned a Nokia phone in their lifetime? Fantastic, the statistics are right, because it's typically about 90%. Who owns a Nokia phone today? There is always a sad 3 or 4. And we will let them off because it will be a corporately supplied piece of equipment and you don't have a choice, right?
No, it's a radical new fabric. It's a brilliant phone they've just launched. It's fantastic.
You're only saying that because someone's in the room. That's just you're just buttering up this guy, that's all. So you have one by choice.
Yes.
Salute this man.
You could drop it on the floor and it still works.
Okay, now, I'll give you that because you've probably got one of the oldest phones still working in existence there. That is probably about 1972, is it? It's beautiful. No. The old ones were the best, right? And why were they the best? Because Nokia said, and their mantra was, we make the best handsets in the world. The problem is, they continued with that strategy and the world moved on. Whereas Apple said, we help people connect and communicate. The vision and the brief and the direction is completely different. Nokia were always just going to make great handsets. The world stopped wanting great handsets. The world moved on. Not to use too many images of Apple, but this is what I'm talking about when I talk about experience. Imagine your brand, your bank, creating the same feeling and the same experience in its customers as this guy. Imagine that. But the reality is, if you get innovation right, and if you build game-changing innovation capability, if you do it in line with customers, if you co-create with customers, and you make it absolutely relevant, there's no reason why a bank can't make a customer feel like that. No reason whatsoever. We don't feel like that about HTC. We don't feel like that about Nokia. We don't feel like that about BlackBerry. But we feel like that about Apple. Yeah? There's no reason why a bank can't make customers feel like that if you get stuff right. So here's the other thing that I want you to take away today. One of the things that will help you drive real game-changing innovation is understanding the subtlety between product design and experience design. There's no reason that you have to fundamentally change your products if it's too difficult for you to do so. What you can change is how you deliver those products, what they look like, what the buying process is, what the experience is like, and those are the simple things that innovation will help you do and how it will help you differentiate from your competitors. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to wait for massive amounts of technological advances to be able to innovate. Sometimes innovation can be beautiful because it's simple. The second thing I want you to take away is you need to get better at having beautiful product visions, yeah, and never losing sight of that. But you need to get better at prototyping, iterating, design. You need to get better at getting the minimal viable product out there, and then you test it with customers, not on them. Yeah? The better you get at that, the better you get at iterating, refining, prototyping, the better your solutions will be, the more aligned to customers they'll be, and if you do that in collaboration with customers, the more likely it is that those customers will buy because they feel linked to them and the solution is exactly what they need. Not close to what they need, it's exactly what they need. That's what you guys need to get better at. I spent 15 years in the design industry, and that is what we're phenomenal at. We understand the subtleties between product and experience design, and we understand how to iterate, how to refine, how to prototype until we get it right, and then we get it to market. And you guys need to get much better at that. That's a fundamental part of the innovation process. So there's a big question, right? And this is what I want you to focus on throughout the day. And when you have discussions with the other experts in the room, the other speakers, with yourselves, with peers, there's a phenomenal amount of expertise in the room that you can tap into. It's not just about me and Bruce and the other guys. There's an enormous amount of experience and things that some of you have tried that others might need to. So tap into everyone that's available today. And I want you to think about this question in the conversations you're having. How do we shape the future, not get consumed by it? How do you start to design the future that you want rather than just trying to keep pace with the future as it unfolds. You have the power to shape things rather than hanging on and hanging on for the ride. But that's your choice. Every organization can design what it wants and design the future that it wants, or it can choose just to try and go with the flow and hopefully survive. So here's another statistic for the number lovers out there. Again, if you look at the average numbers from the majority of surveys, 75% of CEOs name innovation in the top 3 priorities now. About 18 to 20% of them place it at number 1. But of those 75%, only 40% have got an innovation strategy or an innovation process in play in the organization at the moment. So as leaders, this is the second gap that I want you to think about when you have conversations today and when you go back to your businesses. How do we address the gap if we're part of those statistics? If innovation's a priority, we must build a strategy for it. We can't expect innovation to just happen and bubble around the organization so that we can tick the box and say, yes, we're doing innovation. We must approach it strategically. If we don't have a plan, then we're sailing without a rudder. And yes, we're going somewhere and stuff's happening, but is it aligned to the corporate strategy? Is it aligned to the direction the organization's going? Is it aligned to our values? Or is stuff just happening? When you all answered, or the ones that answered the survey today, before today, and the question was, who's doing innovation, and if you're not, why not? 90% of you said yes. So 90% of the people in this room said, yes, we are doing innovation. I salute the 10% that said, no, we're not, because I salute them for being brutally honest. My challenge to you guys is, for the 90% of people that said yes, why did you tick yes? Because you've either ticked yes because there's a few little things that are happening that you label innovation, or right at the other end of the scale, you've ticked yes because you've got a clearly communicated, defined innovation strategy aligned to your corporate strategy and goals, aligned to your organization's values. You've got leadership development going on in your organization specifically about how to lead for innovation. And you've got a program to build innovation into the culture of your organization. If that's why you ticked yes, then I salute you people as well. What I would ask you to do is be brutally honest about why you ticked yes and where you actually sit on that scale. My guess is most of you are down this end. Innovation is too critical to say we are doing it because we feel we have to, because we think everyone else is doing it. It's too important. So here's one of the other things that I want you to consider throughout the day. All the financial services and the banking clients that I talk to say, Chris, we can't innovate. And regulation, as James said earlier, is the biggest thing that comes up. It seems to be the biggest barrier and your perception of that is what stops you innovating. So I want you to go through today and eradicate that just for the purposes of today. Eradicate that as a barrier to innovation. And just see where it allows you to start thinking about. See where it allows you to start exploring. So just for today, don't let the fact that regulation exists in your industry affect the ideas and the solutions that you think you can come up with. As leaders, we need to show people how important innovation is. We cannot ask our organizations for innovation. Innovation is what I call a willing contribution because it relies people to think differently. It relies on people to take some risk. It relies on people to stick their head above the parapet. And it relies on people to be creative. We cannot contractually make people do those things. People only do those when we've built a culture and we've built an organization where they feel as though they can. They willingly contribute creativity and ideas. So as leaders, we need to build environments and cultures and organizations where that's a natural part of how we do things. As leaders, we need to clearly show that we challenge the status quo, that we're constantly saying, what if, what next, what could we do? We demonstrate, we challenge industry norms and orthodoxies in order to get people to think differently. We need to inspire people to want to innovate. And then we need to put tools, strategies, processes, systems, cultures, whatever it takes, we as leaders need to put those in place to then give people the environment and the tools to be able to deliver innovation. I fundamentally believe that every organization and every employee in those organizations has the ability already to solve any challenge that that organization faces. What we typically do with innovation and what we see in big organizations is we see them developing creative thinking programs and teaching people how to brainstorm better. We give them new tools because we think that is where innovation comes from. You don't need to teach people how to be creative, they already are. You don't need to teach people how to brainstorm, they already can. You can teach them to get better at it, but what you need to do is remove the barriers that stop them using those skills in the first place. Most of the organizations I go into can't innovate, not because they can't, but because the organization itself stops them. Whether that's management style, whether it's processes, systems, there will be fundamental barriers that stop and inhibit that organization and people in it from solving problems, solving challenges, coming up with ideas, and innovating. And as leaders, our challenge and our primary goal is to remove those barriers. I spoke at a conference last year, and look this guy up. There's a guy called Mike Wittenstein, and he runs a company in the US called Story Miners, and he is a phenomenally clever guy. And this was a tweet off the back of both of us speaking at a conference. And he said, behind every great customer experience is a great employee experience. If we want innovation, and we want to build innovative experiences, products, services, and we want to deliver exceptional stuff to customers, we can't do that without doing it in-house first. Building a culture of innovation is absolutely vital if we want innovation. So build amazing places to work. And by default, I guarantee you will get innovation as a natural byproduct of building the right environment. One of the things I want to highlight to you is how simple innovation can be, but also how powerful innovation can be. And I also want you guys to think about innovation that's completely outside your sector and your industry. Innovation needs to connect with people. It needs to connect with customers on an emotional level, and it needs to solve real challenges. It's not about designing stuff that we want to sell. It's about designing stuff that customers actually need. Fundamentally different. This is a product called LifeStraw. And this shows you how powerful innovation is, yet how simple it can be. LifeStraw is a plastic tube with a filter in it. Yet it filters 99% of waterborne bacteria. It's been voted as one of the products that is most likely to save more lives than any product in history. It's a plastic tube with a filter in it. That is how powerful innovation can be, and that is how beautifully simple it can be. Don't get consumed by thinking you have to wait for technology and you have to spend billions of dollars on R&D. The simplest solutions can come from anywhere in your organization. When you build the right culture, that's actually where they end up coming from. Several years ago, the senior team at Great Ormond Street Hospital were faced with solving a really, really scary problem, a significant problem. You'll all know what Great Ormond Street is, and they had really, really high incident rates of transferring critically ill babies from the operating theatre to incubators and life support machines. And they racked their brains and they went around other hospitals and other trauma departments all over the world trying to figure out how they could get the transition of that critically ill child from one bed to the next and how they could reduce incident rates. So as I can see, some of you are falling asleep because I am fairly boring and I admit that, but there's nothing I can do. This is just what I do for a living. We've got another competition for you. Who knows how they solved the problem and who they got to help? You don't win a prize for that, but we'll hear it. We will email the senior team at Great Ormond Street Hospital and say their solution is wrong, yours is better. It's a possible solution, right? But those are the types of things that they might have explored, right? Because they looked within their industry. They looked at other trauma teams, other hospitals, other A&E departments. Another thing I want you to take away is look for analogies. So look outside your industry and look for analogies to the problems and the challenges you face. Find other industries, other sectors, other people, other teams that have solved similar problems, look at how they solved it, transfer that knowledge and transfer that solution into your sector and your environment and your challenge. So, first person, anyone? No. He can have it. It wasn't McLaren, but it was these guys. So look at the analogy, right? And I don't undermine the seriousness of a critically ill child, but look at the analogy. You've got an immobile patient that can't interact and can't do anything. You've got an acute, highly trained team that can only do the specific job that they're assigned to do. They can't multitask. If the guy drops a wheel, the guy filling up with fuel doesn't say, I'll get it. Yeah? They have to stick at their specific acute task. They have to do it with absolute accuracy in the shortest possible time. So the Ferrari team helped them develop a process to solve their problem. And overnight, incident rates dropped 50%. That is just as much innovation as launching a game-changing product or service. Everyone in your organization can contribute to innovation and solve problems like that. When you build a culture of innovation, the volume of innovation increases because you make everyone aware that they can contribute. When you pigeonhole innovation around products and services, only a small number of people in the organization say, actually, I've got some ideas on that. The majority of people say, I can't really contribute, I don't know enough about that. So you must build environments where everyone can contribute ideas because dozens and dozens of small incremental ideas are just as powerful and can be just as game-changing as one needle in a haystack. Have a look at these guys. These are called Extended Stay. They're a hotel chain in America. And they had a new CEO, Jim Donald, a few years ago. And when he got there, he realized that the culture had just been completely eroded. Customer service was terrible. Occupancy rates and numbers were terrible. So he needed to do something, and he needed to do something quick. And what he realized was that no one was prepared to do anything other than what they'd been taught to do before. But by default, what they'd been taught to do didn't work. But no one was prepared to take any risk. So he took a cue from the Monopoly board, and he sent every employee a set of get-out-of-jail-free cards. But here's the difference. He then said, you have to use them. And the get-out-of-jail-free card was, try something, do something different, see if it works, and if it goes wrong, you haven't failed. We've learned how not to do it. We've learned something. If it goes wrong, you will not be chastised. Send in your card. I should get out of jail free. Have a look at extended stay now. Completely changed. All because he dealt with the subject of risk. And he changed culture and he changed behavior. Hands up, all the men in the audience who know what that is. So none of you know what that is. Right. The statistics are that about 20% of you do. But we won't embarrass you and ask you to put your hands up and ask why. This is a really interesting story of how luck and serendipity plays its part. When Pfizer were conducting clinical trials for battling heart disease and high blood pressure, etc., in their clinical trials, they found that their test subjects, that just happened to be male, were probably, and I don't know the statistics, but more than likely between 18 and 24, because they were probably poor, daft students who'll do anything for a free meal. And rather than seeing reduced heart rate and reduced, levels that they were looking for, all the test subjects seemed to be walking around a little bit stimulated. And what did they discover? Viagra. Purely by accident. So what did they do? They said, sod the pharma industry, we're now in the sex industry, right? The most successful drug ever. Purely by chance, purely by luck. But what it shows is, if you're doing stuff, if you're looking at innovation, if you're trying stuff, if you're experimenting, if you're trialing, if you're iterating, stuff will happen. If you're not looking and you're not doing anything, by default, you will not find anything. The more you do, the more you trial, the more you test, the more things you uncover, the more you learn, the more innovation you get by default. But the reality is, we can't build strategies on serendipity, right? We can't build strategies on luck. And we can't constantly search for the big radical game-changing thing. We can't constantly search for needles in a haystack. Success doesn't happen by chance. We have to build strategies and we have to build approaches that are going to at least increase the odds and guarantee us some kind of return on investment from innovation. And here's 3 things that I think every organization needs to focus on and needs to become really, really good at. And these will become even more important over the next 5 to 10 years. They're specifically aligned to a lot of the work that I'm doing with clients, which is talking about 10 years out. And 10 years out, we're going to have Generation Z. We're going to have a completely new type of customer and employee. So the first one, and note that it's really about doing these in this order. This is actually a really simplified innovation process. We have to become what I call more intelligent. We have to get away from traditional forms of data. We have to get away from big data and customer focus groups and stuff like that. We have to become more intelligent about the world. Why? Because innovation starts with really deep conversations. We have to become more collaborative. We have to build the right teams to solve the big challenges and the big problems. And that might actually mean looking outside your organization. And dare I say it, it might even mean collaborating with a competitor. And then we have to become more adaptable. We have to get better at getting stuff to market quicker. Because the world's changing at a much, much faster pace on a daily basis. We have to be able to get stuff into that market much faster. And I'm being heckled now with this. So here's the thing, and this flies directly at the 90% of people that said they were doing innovation. Innovation's like teenage sex, and I've not got a problem with this. It's not Viagra and a thing about sex, but innovation's like teenage sex. Everyone's talking about it, which we all are. No one really knows how to do it. All of you think everyone else is doing it. So what do you all do? You all go, tick, yeah, we're doing it as well. Yeah, oh, yeah, innovation, yeah, I've got it licked, yeah, we're doing it. I want you to be really honest about how much innovation you're really doing and how much it's driving the success of your business, how much it's impacting top and bottom line, and how much it's really delivering stuff your customers really want. The playing field is unlevel at the moment because not everyone is really doing innovation. So if you can do it now, you've got a head start. Once everyone is doing innovation, it becomes a core competence. The playing field will level again. And what will tip the balance is how good you are at it. So my final question is, what are you prepared to change? And it's twofold. What are you prepared to change in terms of your organization? And as leaders, what are you prepared to change? Enjoy the rest of your day. Pick as many brains as you can. Take away as much as you can. Ask as many questions as you can. But above all, when you get back to your organizations, really kickstart a proper conversation about innovation. Thank you.